2 years ago, with the help of a lot of you, some of you getting involved in politics for the first time, you defied the Washington conventional wisdom. I mean, you remember, folks did not think we were going to win. Let's face it. Because they didn't know about you. They said, no, you can't overcome the cynicism of our politics. No, you can't overcome the special interests. No, you can't make real progress on the big challenges of our time. They said, no, you can't. What did you say? You said, yes, we can. You proved that the power of everyday people, going door to door, neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, using networks, using the internet, that was stronger than the forces of the status quo. And every single one of you is a shareholder in that mission to rebuild our country and reclaim our future. So I'm back here today just in case you've forgotten what that feels like to change the country. Because on November 2nd, we face another test. And the stakes could not be higher. When I arrived in Washington, about 20 months ago, some of you were there, it was really cold. It's a cold day. It was a cold day, but the spirit was warm. And our hope was that we could pull together, Democrats and Republicans and independents, to confront the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. What we hoped was that we could get beyond some of the old political divides, red states, blue states, that had prevented us from making progress for so long. And we came into this with that spirit because we understood that we're proud to be Democrats, but we're prouder to be Americans. And instead, what we confronted when we arrived was just politics pure and simple. An opposition party that was still stuck in the same failed policies of the past, whose leaders in Congress were determined from the start to just let us deal with the mess that they had done so much to create. Their calculation was simple and cynical. They knew that it was going to take a long time to solve the economic challenges we were facing, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. They understood that because it was going to take a long time, people would be frustrated, they'd feel anxious, they'd be fearful. And so what the other side calculated was, if we just sit on the sidelines, we let Obama and the Democrats in Congress deal with everything, then we can do well in the polls. That was their theory. And that's what they did for the last 20 months. They've said no to just about every idea I've proposed, every policy I've proposed, even ideas they've traditionally agreed with. No, I'm not exaggerating. I mean, we had situations where they would sponsor bills, I'd say okay, and then they'd say, oh, well, if you're okay with it, we must be against it. Happened a bunch of times. That's true. And because they understood that folks were going to be anxious and fearful, they've been tapping into that fear. And now the pundits are saying that the base of the Republican Party is mobilized and energized and excited, and that all of us who worked so hard in 2008, well, maybe we're not as energized. Maybe we're not as engaged. That's what they're saying. I'm just the messenger here. They say that there is an enthusiasm gap, and that the same Republicans and the same policies that left our economy in a shambles and the middle class struggling year after year, that those folks might all ride back into power. That's the conventional wisdom in Washington. We cannot let that happen. We cannot sit this out. We can't let this country fall backwards. The stakes are too high. We have to move this country forward for you and your future. So there better not be an enthusiasm gap, people. Not now.
Speaking tonight to Generation 44, which is the part of the Democratic National Committee that specifically targets younger voters. We've had some glitches in the audio and the video feed there. That's because of weather on the East Coast. Joining us now once again is Eugene Robinson, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist from the Washington Post and MSNBC political analyst. Gene, thanks for sticking with us.
I'm glad to do it, Rachel. Interesting speech.
Is the there better not be an enthusiasm gap something that is better left unspoken? Is it the sort of thing that you ought to be encouraging not to be true, but not saying I don't want it to be true? What's the best way to deal with that?
Well, the enthusiasm gap is frankly so obvious, Rachel, that I think you might as well confront it head on, because he says there better not be an enthusiasm gap, but in fact there is one, and it's been measured in every survey, and it's what kind of militates against the fact that in some polls and some races there have been a lot of signs that Democrats are kind of coming home, that they're focusing in on the election, saying, well, gee, we really, we're upset with the Democrats, but we really don't want the Republicans. But, will they go out to vote? And will those first-time Obama voters, whom he's addressing tonight, Obama's people, will they go out and actually take the trouble to go to the polls? And that's going to be a huge factor on November 2nd.
President obviously trying to make that case overtly. I think I agree with you that it's so obvious, and it is so the common wisdom in Washington. There's no no traction in not talking about it. But in terms of how he's going to motivate people, the thing I can't figure out is if the president is modeling for other Democratic candidates how he thinks they ought to be campaigning, because he's running on his record. He's saying, we've done good stuff over 2 years. It's been really hard. They want us to flag. Let's not flag. And is that modeling for other Democrats how they ought to be running, or is he essentially saying this is president-only campaigning? I know I'm not on the ballot. I'm trying to get people excited, but I realize all you other candidates are essentially going to talk about, outsourcing or whatever.
Right. I think it's more the latter, frankly. I mean, it's modeling for some Democrats who are in safe districts, but for Democrats especially the group of Democrats who won 2 years ago in districts that traditionally had gone Republicans, that were such a Democratic sweep. I mean, they were going to have trouble in any event holding on to those seats, and given the energy again on the other side, on the Republican side, obviously they're not going to go out and give this speech. They're not going to run on Obama's record. They're going to run, in some cases, away from Obama's record. And the White House has signaled that basically, okay, that's cool. You do what you need to do to try to win re-election. But for some Democrats, yeah, this would be a model. I think we'll hear this again and again from him, because he does, I think, uniquely reach a class of voters that kind of span the whole country.
Eugene Robinson, thank you very much for going overtime with us tonight. We really appreciate it, Gene. It's great to see you.
Good night, Rachel.